In April 1943 at Camp Hereford, Texas, Serente Joseph Morelli's hand shook as he penned a letter to his mother in Sicily, which he would receive 8 months later. The words he wrote were inconceivable just weeks ago. "Mother," he began, "they feed us like honored guests, rather than prisoners. We have white bread every day, meat, vegetables, more food than we've seen in 2 years of war." He couldn't fathom these Americans. Through the barracks window, Morelli observed electric lights illuminating the Texas plains, tractors tilling the fields, and American guards sharing cigarettes with their Italian captives. Everything contradicted Mussolini's propaganda. Italy was supposed to be building a new Roman Empire, while America was destined to crumble under the weight of its own divisions. Instead, these prisoners encountered an abundance that defied imagination. The first group of Italian prisoners arrived at Camp Hereford in April 1943, joining approximately 51,000 other Italian POWs who had reached American soil by then. The initial wave of Italian prisoners of war began arriving in the United States in November 1942, following the Allied invasion of North Africa. When General Giovanni Messi's army surrendered in Tunisia after months without supplies and relentless pressure from British and American forces, these men expected harsh treatment, forced labor, or worse. Instead, they found conditions that many would later describe as almost paradisiacal. The end came swiftly for Italian forces in Tunisia after years of battling across North Africa's deserts, where they faced overwhelming odds with no supplies arriving from Italy and German allies, treating them as expendable units. In May 1943, around 50,000 Italian soldiers were among the approximately 275,000 Axis troops who surrendered in North Africa. This group of prisoners would eventually grow to 5,000 Italian POWs in the United States as additional captives arrived from battles in Sicily and mainland Italy. Their journey from defeat to enlightenment began at collection camps in Tunisia. American military efficiency immediately struck them as impressive. Medical examinations were thorough and comprehensive, often providing medical care for the first time in years. New clothing replaced uniforms that had deteriorated into mere patches. However, it was the food that truly amazed them. After months of meager rations, they received white bread, canned meat, coffee with sugar, and chocolate. Transporting them across the Atlantic, were returning from delivering supplies to Europe. Instead of sailing back empty, these vessels carried up to 30,000 POWs per month by summer 1943. During their 2-week voyage across the ocean, Italian prisoners encountered a systematic challenge to fascist propaganda. The ships themselves were testaments to American productivity and manufacturing prowess, which Italy could not match. Radar equipment, once seen only on advanced British warships, was standard on these cargo vessels. Daily meals in the ship's mess were a constant revelation. American sailors enjoyed ice cream machines, unlimited coffee, fresh bread, and meat, often discarding food that would have been considered precious in Italy. This casual abundance of resources stood in stark contrast to their expectations. Upon arrival at ports such as Norfolk, Virginia, or on the West Coast, they entered a world beyond imagination. These ports sprawled across thousands of acres with docks stretching for miles. Numerous ships were bustling with activity, loading and unloading cargo at once. Electric cranes handled loads that would have required dozens of men to manage back in Italy. The most remarkable aspect was the widespread civilian prosperity. Parking lots were overflowing with workers' cars, unlike in Italy where only the wealthy could afford automobiles. Every building had access to electricity. Shops brimmed with goods that were scarce or non-existent in Italian stores prior to the war. Prisoners traveled by passenger train instead of cattle cars, riding in coaches equipped with cushioned seats, electric lighting, and dining facilities. The journey through America's heartland revealed a nation unimaginably wealthy. Each small town boasted electricity, automobiles, and shops filled with an abundance of goods. Factories operated around the clock using electric power, while even rural farms had tractors and electrical lines. Camp Hereford was designated specifically for Italian prisoners, whereas other camps like Camp Hereford primarily housed German POWs. The camp consisted of 4 compounds with barracks, mess halls, and infirmaries surrounded by barbed wire fences and patrolled by armed guards. At its peak, it accommodated free 860 prisoners, including 2 860-80 Italian PS, making it one of the largest centers for Italian prisoners in Texas. The camps surpassed anything seen in Italy's military standards. Barracks featured electric lights, hot showers, flush toilets, and heating systems. Hospitals were equipped with state-of-the-art medical facilities unavailable in Italy before the war, such as X-ray machines and modern surgical tools. To the Italian prisoners, these camps seemed almost like a paradise. Despite occasional instances of mistreatment aimed particularly at the NS, these individuals enjoyed clean living quarters, access to hot showers, plentiful food, and the ability to spend their earnings from work at the post exchange. The abundance of food was a novelty for them. 3 meals daily included meat, vegetables, bread, milk, and often dessert. Holiday feasts surpassed anything they had experienced before the war. Kitchen staff reported throwing away more food each day than entire Italian families received in a week. Everything changed on September 8, 1943, when Italy surrendered and signed an armistice with the Allies. On October 13, Prime Minister Pietro Badoglio's government declared war on Germany. Following Italy's surrender, the Prime Minister instructed Italian prisoners of war to collaborate with Allied forces. In February 1944, the United States Army Service Corps began offering Italians held in the U.S. the chance to join what became known as Italian Service Units, IUs. They had 2 options: remain prisoners or volunteer for these service units and work alongside Americans in non-combat roles. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with over 45,000 out of the approximately 51,000 Italian prisoners joining ISUs to help fill labor shortages across the United States, although officially still considered POWs. They were issued uniforms distinguished by a patch bearing Italy on their left sleeve and garrison caps. They received a monthly stipend of $24, with only 1/3 paid in cash. The rest was given as script for use within their designated base areas to purchase goods and personal items. In California, where the war's impact lingered through 1945 due to intense Pacific theater fighting, Italian prisoners supporting the war effort were met with great enthusiasm. The state's long-established Italian-American community, primarily comprised of fishermen, farmers, and winemakers since the gold rush era, embraced these individuals warmly. One remarkable story involved the Italian POs stationed on Angel Island, who organized regular dances at a hall in San Francisco using their own money earned from working. These Saturday night events became significant social gatherings within the community. American women attended events, acted as chaperones, yet were eager to interact with the Italian soldiers. During World War II, Italian POs worked in California's expansive agricultural fields, experiencing farming on a scale that was difficult to comprehend. Individual farms there surpassed entire provinces back home in Italy in size. Mechanized harvesters efficiently handled tasks that would have required hundreds of workers manually. Ammonia, the Italian service units became crucial contributors to the American war effort by loading ships for D-Day operations, saving crops from spoiling due to labor shortages, and maintaining military equipment with skills they had honed in North Africa. Between 1943 and 1945, these units contributed over 90 million man-days of work within the United States. Financially, the program was estimated to have saved the U.S. government approximately $230 million. At the Brooklyn Army Terminal, Italian prisoners of war played a vital role in loading supplies essential for the liberation of Europe. They worked with enthusiasm, knowing that each shipment brought Italy closer to freedom from German control. In agricultural regions across the country, these workers were instrumental in saving crucial harvests needed to feed both America and its allies. By June 1943, over 1,450 POs resided in camps throughout the United States. As Italy's surrender prompted an expansion of the program, these workers became indispensable across various sectors. Despite regulations prohibiting marriages between prisoners of war and American citizens, romantic relationships blossomed. Such connections often occurred during church services, approved social gatherings, or through work interactions. It is all bile with acconeaments. For instance, chaperone dances were held weekly in Ogden, Utah, for PODOs at a local church, while Italian-American families could visit prisoners on Sundays. These budding romances faced numerous obstacles, but found ways to flourish. with sympathetic clergy sometimes officiating secret weddings despite the rules. Relationships between couples were sustained through correspondence. Many women relocated to Italy after the repatriation process to marry their Italian boyfriends there, before returning to the United States as wives of legally immigrated spouses. The Italian-American community was instrumental in regions with sizable populations of Italian Americans. PWS discovered supportive surrogate families who invited them to Sunday dinners, assisted with letter writing, and fostered connections that endured for decades following the conflict. Christmas 1943 had a profound emotional impact on many individuals. American churches and civic groups sent care packages filled with items such as cigarettes, chocolate, and toiletries, luxuries even unavailable to most American civilians at the time. Local communities organized dinners and celebrations in honor of PW. At Camp Hereford, local churches performed Italian Christmas carols. Catholic masses were held in Latin and Italian during the midnight hour. The festive meal featured dishes like turkey, ham, multiple side servings, and desserts, representing an abundance not seen by Italians since before World War I. This act of kindness towards former enemies dismantled the final remnants of fascist propaganda regarding American military weakness. Italian PWS wrote home about the generosity of Americans, which they believed was a testament to a nation confident in its victory. By 1944, thousands of Italian PS had enrolled in educational programs where they studied English, American history, mathematics, and vocational skills. Universities offered correspondence courses, and the camp screened Hollywood films and published newspapers that evolved from simple newsletters into sophisticated publications discussing democracy and post-war reconstruction. Italian PWS created theaters, formed orchestras, and produced art pieces that are still on display in various locations today. They also constructed elaborate fountains, painted murals, and built chapels at different camps. All's works were not mere prisoner crafts, but professional quality demonstrations of Italy's rich artistic heritage. Upon hearing about the Allied invasion on June 6, 1944, known as D-Day, Italian prisoners of war, POs, rejoiced. I est, poor. They celebrated because their former adversaries were now liberators, freeing Italy from German control. These prisoners worked additional hours to load supplies and adorned boxes with messages supporting Rome's liberation and denouncing the Nazis. When Rome was liberated on June 4, 1944, Italian POs and Italian Americans across America held joint festivities celebrating this significant event. Former enemies had transformed into allies in their shared fight against Nazi Germany. At Camp Hereford, both prisoners and local residents gathered for a large victory mass that attracted thousands of attendees. Throughout their time as captives, Italian POs experienced genuine kindness from American civilians and military personnel. When news reached them about family members who died due to bombings in Italy, American guards and commanders attended memorial services. Some local families even adopted prisoners who had lost everything, ensuring they were not alone during holidays. Medical care was particularly impactful for the prisoners. Italian doctors worked alongside their American counterparts, gaining access to advanced techniques and equipment that would have been unavailable in Italy for years. This allowed them to receive medical treatments and surgeries typically reserved only for wealthy individuals back home. The divide between German and Italian POs grew more pronounced following Italy's surrender. While German prisoners often clung to Nazi ideology, the Italians wholeheartedly embraced their new role as co-belligerents, enthusiastically contributing to Allied efforts. In March 1944, 1-800 Italian service units ISU members were sent to Boston, and initially housed at Camp McKay in South Boston. They encountered a chilly reception from locals, but quickly turned the tide by proving themselves diligent workers at the port. Italian POs also contributed culturally by singing in church choirs and preparing meals for community events, introducing genuine Italian cuisine to second-generation Italian Americans who had never tasted authentic dishes before. Following escalating tensions with the South Boston community, 1-300 members of the ISU relocated to Peddocks Island in Boston Harbor several months later. On the island, they experienced greater liberties, including Sunday boat excursions into Boston's North End, where they frequently dined with Italian-American families. The PWS from Italy observed American industrial and agricultural output that seemed incomprehensible compared to their own country's capabilities. In California's Central Valley, single farms produced more than entire provinces in Italy. Mechanical harvesters processed crops in hours that would have taken weeks back home. Perfect produce was discarded due to minor imperfections, and sometimes whole crop fields were plowed under to maintain market prices. This waste, which could have fed millions of hungry Italians, illustrated the vast production capacity in America. The casual approach toward abundance was particularly striking. Workers threw away half-eaten meals, left lights burning unattended in empty rooms, and drove cars to work even for short distances. Such practices were unimaginable during wartime Italy, when families struggled on minimal rations. Men earned just $8 a month working in the fields or fishing, yet this seemed generous compared to what they had known at home, and they carefully saved money to send back after the war. The Italian prisoners of war left lasting imprints on American culture. They introduced bocce ball to communities that continue playing it today, taught Americans how to make authentic pasta and pizza, which contributed significantly to a multi-billion-dollar industry. Their artistic contributions, fountains, murals, and chapels, are still visible in numerous locations across the country. Camp newspapers published by POWs showcased remarkable transformations over time. Initially focusing on news from Italy, they eventually featured discussions about democracy, American farming techniques, and plans for post-war reconstruction. These publications circulated among camps and helped spread ideas about democratic governance and modern methods. On July 16, 1944, the 38th and 40th Italian Quartermaster Services Companies arrived at Rock Island Arsenal via train from Pine Camp, New York. Their maintenance and support operations were so vital that military commanders requested delays in their repatriation, even after the war's conclusion. At agricultural facilities, these individuals showcased a deep understanding of farming traditions passed down through generations, introducing innovative techniques that enhanced American agriculture. By working in canneries, shipyards, and military depots, they enabled thousands of Americans to join combat roles. The volunteers within the Italian service units also allowed American soldiers, who would have otherwise been engaged in supporting tasks, to take part in direct combat operations. Thanks to their assistance, fewer American men were drafted into military service. The peak number of prisoners of war PWs held in the United States was 44,571, including 371,683 Germans, 52,70 Italians, and 3,9415 Japanese individuals. Among them, approximately 51,000 Italians were stationed across 21 camps spanning 18 states. The Italian PWs contributed a total of 90 million man-days of labor and saved $20–30 million in labor costs. Their efforts freed thousands of Americans for combat duty while ensuring crucial harvests from deteriorating conditions. Despite the challenges, integration was largely successful, with about 45,000 individuals joining the Italian service units. Less than 1% attempted to escape, and many maintained correspondence with American families even after the war ended. Numerous former PWs later returned as legal immigrants. Repatriation began in late 1945, but proceeded at a slow pace due to continued labor demands during the transition to peacetime. Numerous Italian prisoners of state did not wish to depart. They had discovered camaraderie and prospects in America, whereas Italy was still ravaged and under occupation. When the time came for them to leave, whole neighborhoods gathered to bid farewell. Local newspapers at Camp Hereford and elsewhere highlighted the departure of friends rather than captives. And bonds formed during their captivity, both romantic and friendly, were tested by separation. Between December 1945 and July 1946, Italian prisoners of war returned home with an understanding of American democracy, farming methods, and industrial processes. They unknowingly became pivotal figures in Italy's post-war reconstruction, applying the knowledge they gained during their confinement. As promised, many former POs later immigrated to America legally. Employers who recognized their skills, families they had befriended, or wives they had married supported them as they established new lives in the United States. These immigrants were remarkably successful. They founded businesses, especially within food industries and import-export sectors connecting Italy and America. They fostered connections between the two countries that facilitated post-war recovery and trade. Former POs and their descendants achieved significant roles in American society, including judgeships, executive positions, military ranks, and community leadership. Their children, raised with dual Italian-American heritage, uniquely bridged both cultures. Today, physical memorials of the Italian prisoner experience endure throughout America. At Camp Hereford, a small chapel built by prisoners in 1945 still stands as a testament to 5 men who perished there. Crafted from concrete resembling marble, it serves as a pilgrimage site for descendants. Courts named Bosch can be found from California to Massachusetts, a legacy of Italian POs who introduced the game. Italian festivals celebrated across unlikely locations like Texas and Utah honor this heritage. Cooking recipes handed down by P-cooks are cherished family traditions. Yet, the real landmarks are the families and communities that have been reshaped by these culinary exchanges. Business ties initiated in the 1940s persist into the 3rd and 4th generations today. Sister city partnerships between American and Italian towns arose due to connections forged through the P program. Historians acknowledge the Italian P experience as a remarkably effective transformation, turning adversaries into allies. Unlike conventional re-education efforts which relied on propaganda, Italian participants were swayed by first-hand experiences of American democracy and prosperity. Several elements contributed to this success. Italy's surrender in 1943 altered the status of P individuals from enemies to co-belligerents. The presence of Italian-American communities acted as cultural bridges. Shared Catholic faith among many Italians and Americans fostered strong connections. Pre-war economic hardships in Italy made PS more receptive to alternative ideas. American generosity and prosperity contradicted the regime's propaganda, making a profound impact on PS participants. Comparing this with German PS is revealing. While Germans frequently maintained their Nazi ideology despite similar treatment, Italians almost universally adopted American values. This divergence can be attributed to cultural differences and the timing of Italy's surrender. The Italian P experience had significant repercussions for both nations. For America, it showcased the effectiveness of kindness and prosperity in winning hearts and minds. For Italy, returning PSWs brought back knowledge that played a crucial role in post-war democratic development and economic recovery. Former PWs established business links between the two countries, fostering trade and investment. They also introduced American agricultural and industrial techniques, which modernized Italian production methods. Crucially, they retained vivid recollections of a functioning democracy, which served as valuable templates for Italy's post-war governance. The program flourished due to its reliance on showcasing rather than preaching. Italian POs observed the efficiency of American society in treating adversaries with respect. They marveled at the production capabilities that ensured victory and were astounded by living standards that debunked fascist rhetoric as mere fantasies. In the 1970s, former Italian POs initiated reunions in the United States. These events celebrated transformation and camaraderie rather than their time as prisoners. The 1988 reunion at Camp Hereford attracted hundreds of ex-POs, along with thousands of Americans who had been involved with them during captivity. Veterans expressed profound gratitude for American kindness, highlighting how their imprisonment had fundamentally altered their lives, turning enemies into family members. They emphasized that their incarceration was a fortunate turn of events, leading to opportunities for democracy, prosperity, and friendship. At these gatherings, elderly men who once served under Mussolini's regime embraced the American guards who had become lifelong friends. Their grandchildren, both American and Italian, played together, embodying the spirit of reconciliation. Why did Italian POs refer to their time in American camps as a paradise? Not because captivity was enjoyable, but because it unveiled possibilities they never dared imagine. They learned that prosperity stems from freedom rather than conquest, that diversity enhances strength instead of diminishing it, and that democracy operates more effectively than dictatorship. They saw ordinary Americans living better lives than Italian aristocrats, with workers owning cars, farmers utilizing machinery, and factories producing abundant goods. The kindness shown by their captors contrasted sharply with the callousness of their own government. This perceived paradise was relative to years of war, famine, and propaganda deceit. American camps provided sustenance, security, and dignity. America offered a beacon of hope and opportunity compared to the devastation that awaited in bombed-out occupied Italy. The experiences of Italian prisoners of war, POWs, left an indelible mark on American culture. Pizza, now a multi-billion-dollar industry, gained popularity thanks in part to POW cooks who taught Americans authentic preparation methods. Espresso culture took root decades before Starbucks appeared, introduced by Italian POWs to communities unfamiliar with genuine coffee. Across the United States, especially in small towns, Italian festivals commemorate these connections forged through POW experiences. In Hereford, Texas, for example, an annual POW reunion has become a cherished community tradition. Similarly, in California's Central Valley, wineries established by former POWs or their descendants produce wines using techniques learned in Italy. The linguistic influence was also profound. Thousands of Americans learned Italian from POWs, spawning a generation of Italian speakers that facilitated post-war business and cultural exchanges. New words entered local vocabularies, particularly in food and agriculture. Beyond the immediate $230 million in labor value provided by Italian POWs, their contributions extended to long-term economic ties. Many former prisoners became American citizens or maintained business connections, fostering billions of dollars in trade between Italy and America. The agricultural methods they acquired in Italy helped the country's post-war recovery. Industrial techniques observed during captivity influenced Italian manufacturing, contributing to the Italian miracle of the 1950s and 1960s. Businesses benefited from these cross-cultural relationships, with import-export firms, food companies, and manufacturing partnerships thriving thanks to contacts made in POW camps. Studies of former Italian prisoners revealed impressive psychological outcomes. Unlike many other prisoner populations suffering long-term trauma, Italian POWs in America experienced lower rates of depression and PTSD compared to soldiers who were not captured. Psychologists attribute this resilience to several factors: superior treatment that exceeded expectations, meaningful work providing a sense of purpose, social integration reducing isolation, opportunities offering hope, and the shift from enemy status to ally after Italy's surrender. The psychological effects reach beyond the individuals themselves to their families. Children of former prisoners often recalled hearing positive stories about their father's time in captivity, which is uncommon for war experiences. This optimistic outlook shaped family relationships and international views for decades to come. The tale of Italian prisoners in America illustrates how conflict can unexpectedly bring about change. Soldiers who came as supporters of Mussolini left as staunch advocates for democracy. Former foes became friends, with prisoners eventually becoming partners, and many ultimately becoming Americans. Through acts such as sharing meals, offering medical assistance, permitting religious practices, and facilitating communication with their families, America successfully transformed its adversaries more effectively than any propaganda could have done. Witnessing American society at its finest inspired these men to desire similar prosperity and freedom for their own country. Their impact went beyond mere labor. They enriched American culture, bolstered Italian-American communities, and created enduring ties between nations. Whether in Italy or the United States, their descendants carry forward the legacy of reconciliation and friendship after conflict. These prisoners did not find paradise within the confines of the camps, but rather through discovering what a democratic society could achieve. Upon returning to Italy, they carried seeds of transformation that would aid in rebuilding a democratic nation from the remnants of fascism and return of vastism. Ultimately, 51,000 Italian soldiers captured in North Africa found in American captivity the dignity, opportunity, and hope that Mussolini's regime could not provide. They referred to it as paradise, not because it was flawless, but because it demonstrated that perfection was attainable. Through their transformation, enemies became family, and two nations forged a friendship that endures through generations. Their legacy teaches us that even in war's darkest moments, humanity can prevail, that kindness can triumph where weapons cannot, and that showing adversaries a better path may convert them into friends. The Italian prisoners who discovered paradise in America demonstrated the power of reconciliation, the influence of democratic ideals, and how treating enemies with dignity can yield victories more enduring than any military conquest. Most of the camps have since been reclaimed by farmland or transformed into suburban developments. In Hondo, Texas, there is a tiny chapel. In California's bocce courts, Italian voices resonate. Across numerous American towns and cities, families boast ancestry tied to an Italian soldier who discovered a form of paradise in captivity and decided to remain. They originally came as warriors from a crumbling empire. Upon leaving, they transformed into constructors of a democratic era. They arrived as detainees but found freedom and prosperity. In that transition, two nations forged a bond unbreakable by conflict or the passage of time.